Some producers get lucky. Some never catch a break. When your plays win 4 Pulitzers and 2 Tonys in 8 years, obviously, luck has nothing to do with it. Welcome to Women in Theater. I'm Linda Weiner, theater critic and arts columnist of Newsday. And our guest today is Daryl Roth, who in a few short years has gone from being that rich lady from New Jersey to that smart producer with great taste. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So are you surprised at the Daryl Roth that you are now as opposed to the Daryl Roth you were 10 years ago?
Well, I'm happy with the Daryl Roth I was, and I'm happy with the Daryl Roth that I have become vis-a-vis theater. And it's actually 14 years that I've been doing this.
Well,
since 1987, the 88 season was closer than ever. So I feel that it's been a great journey for me, and it's...
Well, and for the theater's lucky to have you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It's been great. I mean, I feel very good about the work I've done, and I think that's what I can feel good about.
Sure.
You know, that's the proof. Pardon the pun.
Pardon the pun. Proof being one of her
plays.
Pulitzer Prize winning and Tony winning plays.
One of the great plays that I was lucky enough to be involved in producing on the commercial level. And I feel very proud of the work that's been put out there that has broadened the horizon for a lot of writers who might not have maybe had a chance to be seen by so many people.
I think that's really the point here, is not so much the prizes or the whatever, is that the emphasis on the taste. Is that if I can say the 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, Edward Albee's 3 Tall Women in 1994, at a time when Edward Albee was not a sure thing anymore. No, he had been going through a very hard time.
That's right.
How I Learned to Drive, Paula Vogel, a play about consensual incest. Not something that somebody would think, oh yeah, I think this is a sure thing. I think I'll just put some money in that. 1999, Wit, a play about ovarian cancer that was, a lot of people didn't even want to produce, much less, think that they might get famous over it. 2001 Proof, which is, of course, won both the Pulitzer Prize and the Tony Award. And then in 2002, Albee's The Goat, a play about a man with primal impulse, force, a love, a primal love, an unconventional love for...
The play is about love.
The play is about love. And did, in fact, win a Tony Award, and may still win a Pulitzer Prize. Those Pulitzer Prizes are not out yet.
No, I think it would probably be in this next year's running.
It wasn't eligible for the last year. So that's really quite a lineup of risky plays. Amazingly risky plays.
But risky on the commercial level, not risky on the level of quality or wonderful writing or wonderful storytelling.
How do you
and
make
I think
the
that's
decision?
the thing.
How do you decide?
Well, I decide in a very sort of personal and intimate way. If it's a play that I'm reading on a page, or if it's a play that I'm lucky enough to see, perhaps in a regional or not-for-profit theater, or if it's a play that I go to a reading of, which I love best because then I can, not sort of leave interpretation to my own read. I sit and I say and feel and think about how it affects me. Does it affect me emotionally, and does it affect me intellectually? Does it make me feel something about these people? What are the relationships? And for me, that's always been my guideline, because I think in any business, theater or anything anybody does, it's really about your own instincts and believing in them. Because what more do we have? If you're going to put yourself on the line, then you have to put yourself on the line based on what it is you truly believe in. And, my career has been a wonderful career, but I've had some big misses and some, big flops financially. But I can sit here and tell you I've never had something I'm sorry I produced. Never. Because I've just believed in what I've done. Now, not everybody agrees with me, and that's okay, because people have different taste,
What?
Well, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's
fine. We haven't agreed always.
No.
Not every single time.
That's
but actually,
okay.
actually, our percentage is pretty high. is remarkably high. But I was looking over the list, and I hadn't realized that you were one of your first Broadway ventures was Nick and Nora in 1991. So I might have had something to do with sending you to off-Broadway, which was probably very good for off-Broadway.
So then I really should thank you. The Nick and Nora story is an interesting one because for whatever the reasons are, and when you try to produce a musical, it's a big engine to push. And I was a junior person. It was early in my career. You know, I joined on as an associate producer, and I kept my eyes open. I tried to learn. I tried to do as best I could. And I did learn a great deal. And I think the biggest lesson for me was to try to be in situations where you could be more hands-on and make a difference, which is what sent me to Off-Broadway and to work on smaller, more intimate pieces where I could, in my learning process, be more effective. The good news about Nick and Nora, which I will never, never regret, is that I made wonderful, wonderful friendships. Arthur Lawrence, Charlie Strauss, Liz McCann, who I produce with to this day, and everybody involved in the production, the Nederlanders, they were all wonderful people. And sometimes things just don't work, you know, and so there you go. But what it did for me at that point, which you're alluding to, was make me realize that I need to be in a different situation where there is an opportunity for me to be involved in all aspects of the production. And on a smaller production, one can do that. One can learn more. I now know, some 14 years later, that you can be as effective in a larger, you know, Broadway scenario. But for me in those days, I was really on my learning curve. And so I feel comfortable now, much more comfortable now. And as I said, I don't regret anything. You know, some things work, some things don't. The most unexpected things work in my experience. I mean, who would have thought, for example, you alluded to Wit, that it would be such a huge commercial success? The truth is it was always a literary, it was a literary success from the moment Maggie Edson's pen hit the paper, because it was a beautiful story, so well told. And women and men alike related to this woman's story, Professor Baring. And it wasn't on my priority list to think about the commerciality of the play. It was on my priority list to put it out there for people to find and experience. And that was an unexpected delight, you know, that it reached so many people and did well financially. So, you know, there are lots of checklists for success.
In retrospect now, when you see how a play such as Proof or a play such as The Goat can actually find an audience on Broadway. Right. In retrospect, are you sorry that How I Learned to Drive and Wit didn't get a chance on Broadway?
No, actually I'm not. And the reason is times have changed a bit. And that was the beginning of the play, the time of Wit and the time of How I Learned to Drive. It was just the beginning of a serious dramatic piece of work finding a safe home on Broadway. It was still much more hospitable off Broadway, I would say. And I think that now, with the plays that we see on Broadway, happily, there's a much more receptive, open quality from the audience and critics as well, and people, you know, doing their overview of theater to support the play on Broadway. It's a cyclical thing, but at the time of How I Learned to Drive, it belonged off Broadway. It was a very intimate play. It's beautifully cast, beautifully written. Paula Vogel is just genius in my book. It needed the hug, I would say, of a small space.
At this time, if we're opening now, do you think you would have it in a small Broadway house?
I think at this time it would go either in a very small Broadway house or most definitely off Broadway. I mean, I love off Broadway. My heart is there and remains there. I'm doing a play in the upcoming season off Broadway. I hope to always produce off Broadway because certain plays need a smaller space. I feel the play can never be inappropriate in its home.
This is my question. I'm wondering, I've never been able to see a play off Broadway, or very, very seldom have I been able to see a play off Broadway and think, oh, for sure, this is a play that they'll want to move to Broadway, that a producer will make. I mean, there's sometimes I have been able to. The Sisters Rosenzweig you see in a little theater, you know, that's meant for Broadway. I was surprised that Proof in that little theater would be able to hold on Broadway. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Well,
I was surprised that The Goat was originally staged on Broadway. That's such a bold move. How do you make that cut?
Well, there are two different and both, I think, interesting stories. In the case of Proof, which began at Manhattan Theater Club in a smaller theater, the decision was made to move it to Broadway by the commercial producers that then took it the next step because of two things. One, we felt the story was bigger than the space. We felt there was a universality to the story. We felt that the original cast, Mary Louise Parker as the lead, was inviting. We felt that there was a good buzz when it was at Manhattan Theater Club, that a lot of people wanted to see this play, and we just decided to be bold. We just decided to go for it. We believed in the material. It just felt like the right move. It's a decision that the producers in collaboration made. In the case of The Goat, it was a different story. The Goat was not done anywhere else before. It didn't come from a small theater and up through the ranks.
No, it opened cold on Broadway.
It opened cold on Broadway.
Very unusual.
People said we were probably crazy, but Liz and I talked about it with Edward, and it was time for Edward Albee to have his next new play done on Broadway. It was just the right thing to do. And the controversial nature of The Goat made us feel that if it had a whole round of the regional theaters or a not-for-profit theater, it would have been up for the kind of criticism that we didn't want to open up to. You know, it's a very risky play in its subject. It's a very risky story to put out there.
So that if
on
it
the
were
surface,
a non-profit, then you would have gotten all the people saying, "Why does this getting government grants?" Do you mean?
No. I just meant people talking about it, critically. Oh, it's about this man who falls in love with a goat. Well, that's the surface of the story.
Yes.
It's a deep and magnificent story of love and human connection and forgiveness, and I mean, you could go on and on about what this play is about. And we just felt gutsy about it. I don't know, we just said, let's just do it. And we did it. And sometimes it's an instinctive feeling, and sometimes it's something as practical as not having a theater off Broadway or on Broadway. It depends.
And the press actually came around about it, really. That you got very few very positive reviews.
We did have mixed reviews when we opened.
You got mixed reviews when you opened. I went back 2 months later, wrote a column saying I was wrong.
Right, which was very gracious of you.
Well,
it was.
And a number of us since have gone back and said, this is a better play than we thought it was. And now it's this surprise hit. Don't you think it's...
I think it is a surprise hit, and I think a couple of things happened to factor into that. In the beginning, as it opened cold, there wasn't a very long period of time for everyone to get comfortable with the material. Both people on stage and in the audience, I might add. It took some time to have people get into the rhythm of this play. And once that happened, and people got over the shock value of The Goat, it became a much deeper theater experience for everybody, on stage and off. Then, as magnificent as our first cast of Mercedes Ruehl and Bill Pullman were, and they were genius and courageous, I might say, our second cast, which brought Sally Field to Broadway and Bill Irwin to this play, it sort of blossomed into yet another chapter for this play, which people were kind of afraid of in the beginning, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, sure.
And it brought people into the theater that might not ordinarily come to see this play, and opened up a whole other level. And so the surprise is that it goes on in ways that we had hoped, and in ways that, Liz and I, and certainly Edward, never questioned, I'm sure, the magnificence of this play. But it's happening in the way we had hoped. So now we're planning to go to other cities, and people will receive it differently. I think that's the good news.
So there will be different casts touring? You plan to
We're
tour?
We're thinking of major cities and hopefully a London production. I think that Edward's work is very well received in London.
Yes.
Excuse me.
So that's one of the surprise successes. Conspicuous surprise failure, things that really hit you in the back of the head? That you thought, this is a sure thing, I love this so much, it has to succeed?
Yes. Not that I knowingly would say this is a sure thing, because the business
but in your
is
heart,
not
that
gives you that.
I love this. Everyone, this I love. This must exist.
Two things actually that come to mind. One was a play that I did earlier in my career called The Baby Dance by Jane Anderson. It was a magnificent story about baby buying and adoption. And it was so heartfelt and so emotionally, sound on every level and beautifully acted. And the New York Times didn't like it at all. And they kind of pulled the rug out from under us. It was at the Lucille Lortel Theater off Broadway, and it had great support from a strong core audience. It was a tricky thing to try to beat the challenge of that really devastating review.
And that was early on.
That was very sad.
Yeah.
It was very sad for me because it was a powerful play. And to this day, when people say, I've liked a lot of the things you've done, and I remember this play, The Baby Dance, people will say, people do remember it. It was like an arrow through your heart. It was such a strong play. So that was a disappointment. Defying Gravity, another beautiful play about the Challenger disaster and Krista McCullough's story. Magnificent play. It didn't really find its audience, although everyone that saw it loved it, but it was disappointing to me that it couldn't run long enough.
That one really pulled the rug out from under you in some ways.
Well, it did momentarily.
Yes.
We have to go on. We have to go on each time out of the box. It's a new experience, and you have to be willing in this business, as I'm sure almost any business, to be willing to take failure in a way that doesn't daunt you from going on, because it's inevitable.
But isn't it great that you produce with your heart, that therefore that you care when they fail, because
I care deeply.
Because each one is something that you really care about, as opposed to it being just a business.
Oh, of course.
The sort of moving, what's the cliche about the furniture company, and they move them in and they move them out, move in the next one and move them out. This is not the way you work.
No, it's not the way I work because, well, I am a very emotional person.
And we love it.
Sometimes it stands in my way, and other times it stands me in very good stead because I can really feel the journey of any play. And I do. I mean, I feel it deeply, and I feel everybody who's involved in any production become sort of like a family unit for that moment in time, on the historic overview. I have my families from different plays that I refer to and hopefully still have, connections and ongoing work with. In fact, I just recently joined the board of a small theater company called Labyrinth, and it's run by Seymour Hoffman, who I first came to know in this very said Defying Gravity, where he played the engineer in the most moving monologue I think I have ever heard. In fact, when he came and auditioned for the play, I sat, with the casting agent and the people involved in the play, and I broke into tears just from his audition. He was just so moving and magnificent. Obviously, he's gone on to have a magnificent career in both theater and film.
And acting and directing.
And acting and directing. In fact, one of the things I'm about to produce is a play that Philip directed called Our Lady of 121st Street, which was done in his not-for-profit Labyrinth Theater Company. So my connections go on and on. I mean, I feel as though the reason my career is successful is because of the people that I have brought into my life, and hopefully whose life I'm in, so that we can go on to make good work, and we can go on to, help playwrights put the word out, the word they're trying to get out there. I mean, I think that's my job as a producer, is to really be able to connect with people in a way that I can, help put their words out. That's what a producer is.
Your son Jordan, who's also a really fascinating producer,
fabulous guy,
who produced the Rocky Horror Show that I love.
Right. Oh, good.
I love this show.
And the Donkey Show, which is running in its fourth year.
But I love the Rocky and the Donkey Show.
Right.
Give it a credit. It's been running forever. Anyway, he said in some interview that these are your babies, that you nurture these shows, that there's a maternal thing that happens.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And that's lovely, isn't it?
It is what it is.
Yeah.
It's who I am, and it is what it is. Some people criticize me for being, schmoozy woozy and, whatever. And fine. That's who I am. I can't help that,
Now, theater was in your life forever, right? Your family took you to things when you were growing up.
Yes. I would say theater was always in our lives as audience members and people who supported theater and loved theater. I did not work in the theater until I began working in the theater in 1987. But as a child, I was exposed to theater early on. My parents were very, very wonderful about exposing both my sister and myself to everything and anything we could. We lived in New Jersey growing up, which was, a stone's throw from New York City, and so we could take advantage of the city and the cultural aspects. We saw ballet at an early age, but theater is what did it for me, I have to say.
And what was the one thing that made you think you wanted to work in it too? You wanted to get your hands dirty?
It's an interesting question. I don't know if there's a simple answer. Most people know that I started later in my life. It was not something that I felt was open to me earlier on, even though I always loved it. I couldn't quite figure out a way in. It seemed to me if you weren't going to be an actor or a director or someone involved in stagecraft, producing wasn't anything that I could put my hands around in the early days and figure out, okay, how do I do this? And I think a lot of things came together in my mind. I was raising my family and loving that and adore my family. But there was a time in my life where I really had some introspection and tried to figure out what would make me a happy person. My family makes me happy, and that's good. We're all growing, we're all strong, we're all okay. What would be my career choice? I was working as a designer in New Jersey. I did commercial office
interior.
Yeah. Commercial offices, and that was a wonderful opportunity for me to both be at home and work at the same time.
You studied art?
I was an art history major, yeah. And I don't know, it was just kind of the simplest revelation of a person saying to themselves, what do you really want to do when you grow up? Except I was already grown up. And it was theater. And I figured out that...
I believe in serial lives. Don't you love serial lives?
Yeah, I think I'm in a certain chapter right now, and it's just a great chapter for me because it's what I want to do. It's what I have, I think, become good at. Not necessarily was I always so good at it, but I always had passion for it. I always had the tenacity to not give up. And I always had a feeling that I could do this. And I'm not such an overly confident person, basically, but I just sort of thought I could do this.
Yeah.
So.
And I read, first of all, did it annoy you there was this wonderful New Yorker endless, one of those New Yorker endless interviews, profiles with you recently, which was just wonderful, except that the headline was, "An amateur from New Jersey comes to Broadway." Which doesn't, at what point do they stop calling you an amateur from New Jersey? You don't even live there anymore.
I don't, but my heart's in New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. My mom still lives there.
And also just this sense that your plays, that you like family plays, or there was a suggestion that your plays are kind of, they didn't use the word middlebrow, but there was a suggestion that the choice was kind of safe. And I was thinking, what about the play about the baby, Edward Albee's play about the baby, which was completely off the wall? I don't think any of the choices that you make, or very few, are safe choices.
I think what the writer was alluding to, actually, at least the way I read it, was that, I think in a complimentary way, he was saying that he thought I was in touch with what people want to see. And yeah, the choices were risky. I think he was pointing that out, but saying also that maybe as a woman of a certain age who is, in fact, statistically the theater-buying public, that maybe he was suggesting, I believe he was, that I knew what people might want to come and see. All in all, I was happy with the article. The amateur from New Jersey part, you know what? I was an amateur, and I was from New Jersey, and here we go. But I think the arc of the story kind of said in a nice, honest fashion that, I kind of took that journey, and happily here I am. So I didn't have an issue with it. It was okay.
Are you worried about that audience that you represent in terms of broadening that audience? I know that in your theater at you have your own theater, the Daryl Roth Theater, that's in Union Square, where you want De La Guarda is there, where my husband's children come in. That's all they ever want to see.
No, it's amazing.
It's amazing. And then you also have a new theater now, a Black Box Theater, where Al Pacino's going to be doing Oedipus? Is that where he's
no,
going to do it?
actually, Al Pacino is going to come in and do Oedipus in the large space when De La Guardia leaves.
Oh, okay.
What's in the small space, and what I hope to continue in the small space, which is this fabulous little 99-seat black box called DR2, is offering it to not-for-profit companies that don't have their own home to produce, for 4 and 5 week bits, or for anyone who has a small play that they want to just try out, or 1 and 2 person plays. It's a wonderful, I won't call it a workshop space because it's a totally beautiful outfitted theater, but it's for small work that needs to sort of have its introduction, and so that's what DR2 is about. I think that the Al Pacino project, which is an ongoing project that he's very excited about, on the heels of Salome, will come into the large space whenever he's available, when De La Guardia is finished. And so far, they're doing very well. I'm thrilled, because it's a great experiential thing. But your question is more about younger audience.
The demographics of the audience.
I'm trying very hard.
They can't all look like us,
No. And what's wonderful about what Jordan Roth is doing, and some of the other younger producers, is focusing on the kind of theater that younger audiences are excited about. And I think for the most part, it's interactive, it's vibrant, and it's theater that represents their generation. Now, De La Guardia fits into that category because it's youthful, but it also runs the gamut. All generations love De La Guardia because it's so wild and wonderful. With Rocky Horror, all generations loved it. The people that remembered it when, and the moviegoers, and new audiences that were brought to it with the creative, production and the creative casting that Jordan did. But I think having your finger on the pulse of what young people want and what will bring them into theater is very much on my mind. But then can you do a crossover?
Do you get them into the other ones?
I think so.
One quick question. If you had one thing you could change as a woman right now in the theater, what would it be?
I guess it would be people not worrying about gender as much.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We are.
Daryl Roth, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wish we had 2 hours.
It was good.
Thank you for joining us. On behalf of the League of Professional Theater Women, I'm Linda Weiner, and this has been Women in Theater.